Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, Brandwatch Vizia, Next Generation Social Command Center. Before we begin, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. We will be recording today's session, and we'll make that recording available to you along with the slide deck a few days after the session. You'll receive an email with that information. We will be taking questions and answering them at the end of the session. So if you have any, please route them to us through the GoToWebinar interface, and we will do our best to answer all those at the end. If you have any other questions or needs during the meeting, you can definitely put those in the chat as well, and we'll try to get to those. And we'll also be monitoring Twitter, so you can reach us there at Brandwatch or #Brandwatch. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenters today. We have Yves Sangenito, Vice President of Marketing at Brandwatch, and Sebastian Hempstead, Executive Vice President of North America for Brandwatch.
Hi. So, thanks everyone for joining us today for the talk. What we wanted to do is run through, or talk about some of the challenges that our customers have been facing, and really talk about the approach that we've taken and show you some of the new products that we've called Vizia, which is about data visualization for social command centers, but not just for social media command centers, for events and lobbies and C-suites and so on. We'll touch on that as we go through this. We thought this quote was a great starting point. So the purpose of business is to create and keep a customer, and the systems that are built for social media command centers are all about how to help make that happen. So our customers were talking about how they can increase customer loyalty, how they can improve the customer experience in order to help build customers and help keep customers as well. So what does it look like from a model perspective, from the high-level perspective? Well, actually, it's fairly complex. There's quite a lot to it. And we're going to work through some of these points, and we're going to really sort of talk to the high points before we get into the product. But I wanted to give you this sort of overview of really how a social media command center works in the environments our customers are using it. Essentially, there are three elements to the operating system, if you like, the underlying technology for a command center. It's usually made up of listening and analytics, some form of engagement and publishing, and a way of visualizing that data. The command centers can be physical, but they can also be virtual. They should be able to meet many use cases. It's not always PR or crisis management. It can be real-time marketing. It can be customer service. It can even be there for tech teams and IT security people. Typically, that team in the middle there, in the gray circle here, the social hub, are servicing a number of internal clients. Those clients come across all of the functions and all the lines of business that you'd expect. So if it's a bank, it might include mortgage and wealth management. If it's a tech company, it may include different brand teams. However that works, their needs need to be reflected within the command center, and the command center needs to be specifically designed to allow them to access the right information for them, and for them to be able to interact with that information in the way that suits them best. As we said, these aren't always physical command centers. They can also be virtual. So that means that command centers, or at least the information that they're providing, should be accessible via tablet and via phone as well. And that's something we've had to think about as we go through the development process. So let's just have a quick look at some of the things that we had to think about when we were talking to our clients, really what they were telling us was important. One of the first things was that the technology has to help them separate the signal from the noise. The scale of these operations, especially for large brands, when there's huge amounts of conversation, mean that they cannot listen to everything. They have to be selective. Selective hearing can be a great thing. And this is one place where that really applies. So if we want conversations that are specific for the PR team, we need to identify those and separate those ones from the ones that might be more interesting for a customer service team or for the marketing team. Triaging those posts in an automatic fashion is really important for these situations, and being able to automatically route posts across the organization are also important. This is one of the key blocks that clients were seeing in terms of being able to move forward with these sorts of models, because because they just couldn't scale with the volume of information that was coming in.
And I would just add to that, in thinking about the actual data, command centers are all about, oftentimes they look on the surface, on the face of things, as if they're just displays. But in fact, what's really important is the data that's coming through them. And so making sure that you're able to capture the data that's relevant and feed that to the right teams is really the hub of how this plays into this model.
I'd agree. So next up, they need to be able to engage and respond at the speed of social. Well, what does that mean? It means that we know that there are timings around social. We know that this is a faster platform, a faster medium through which we can communicate. And that, in fact, by not answering posts, we can make situations worse, especially if we've opened up that channel of communication into the brand. Not responding in a timely fashion can be seen as rude and actually can have a detrimental effect. Equally, when we match that back to the conversation we were talking about before, about scale, these two pieces have to work together. So to enable you to respond, we have to deal with the signal-to-noise problem. Each channel has to be understood. So Twitter, the dynamics of converting on Twitter versus the dynamics of working with people on blogs or on forums is different again. The dynamic of the conversations are directed at you versus the conversations that are directed between two other people having a conversation. Also have different rules of engagement. However, the command center, part of what the technology in there can do is really enable you to act in that way, to be able to get into that conversation quickly. Now that can be great if it's a potential client. It can be great if being quick there is obviously crucial, but it can also be great if it's a potential crisis because you can really get engaged early before it becomes a real issue.
And if we think about command centers of the past, if you're familiar with any of the ones that have been formulated over the last couple of years, one of the things that we heard from our client base and from looking at the market in this area and the gaps was that social is very quick and it moves very fast and it's very spontaneous, and yet command centers were not. They lacked the ability to change on the fly. They lacked the ability for people to interact as quickly with them, and they were, in some sense, a static view at the data. And so in this case, making it the actual environment that the data is coming through and being visualized through is an important part of making it interactive and more in line with how social media actually works.
Yeah, and it's probably worth saying at that point that we're talking here about command centers as we're talking about a series of screens and sort of numbers and figures and bits of technology, but they're not. They're operational units. They're part of the organization. They should be aligned with the business processes of the organization. They have service level agreements. They have inputs and outputs, whether they have a requirement for resources, for staffing, for training, for bringing those people up to speed. You have to think about the composition of those teams, cross-functional. Are they going to be dealing with issues? Are they going to be routing issues? So again, when we're talking about social media command center here, we are really sort of talking about a holistic collection, not just the technology. Of course, we're going to be talking about the technology today, but there are a number of different layers that we've got to deal with. Again, we've talked about scaling here. We've talked about the signal to noise. We've talked about that speed of response. But scaling is crucial from the other point, which is realistically most of the clients that are talking to us are running a small central team, either in one or two physical locations, or virtually. And those teams are really set up to service the rest of the organization. So it is a small central hub and spoke model typically. That enables them to scale. And one of the crucial elements is, if that is the case, is that how it's organized, that team has to have the tools to be able to manage the information for all of those other teams out there. And it has to be able to do that in a way that allows two-way conversation to happen around those pieces of information. And also, they have to have ways of communicating. So we're going to talk about one of the pieces we're going to show you here is about how we can, for example, message through Vizia, which is the new technology we've been launching, so that you can actually let a specific team know what's actually happening around a particular spike, for example. So these things are become very, very important in how the technology supports the organization in being able to scale. And then we come on to being smarter and more efficient. All of these things are building to that. Better data coming into the command center in the first place, automated triage processes that are in place, aligned business processes, the right people, the technology supporting hub and spoke models with small central teams managing the larger business units. All of this is about efficiency. We go back to the social media command center is an operational unit, and people want to see efficiency from that. They want to understand what the ROI is going to be around that. So the technologies need to work together. They need to work together in a seamless manner to allow this efficiency.
And another part of that on the efficiency element is even just putting social intelligence and the data in the hands of the different teams makes them more efficient in the way they do their jobs already. There's real-time information that can inform product development, it can inform brand reputation, it can inform how your customers are experiencing and how, who's advocating, who's unhappy, and how you can interject to change that experience. So efficiency isn't just about the technology either, it's also about making sure that the real-time nuggets of information that are really valuable to your business are infused within the general processes of how different teams work.
Absolutely.
And making that more accessible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which, accessibility.
Yeah, very well segued there. So let's talk about accessibility. Now, we'd all like to think that crises, when they hit, either just after we get to work, or just, preferably an hour or so before we leave, so we have time to deal with these things. However, most people out there realize that that's rarely the case. Friday, 9 p.m. is when things tend to go wrong. So if a command center is being used, for example, for crisis management, the technology in this situation, well, it's twofold, actually. Firstly, the technology needs to be accessible from wherever you are. So unfortunately, if you are in the restaurant or in the bar at the end, coming up to the weekend, and you get that alert, you want to be able to access that data right there and then. And so mobile access becomes really important. Of course, many of us are now using iPads and iPad minis and all sorts of different tablets, so tablet access then becomes key. I don't want to just be able to see that information, however, I need to be able to interact with that information and change the views of the data that matter to the teams that are being affected. And so we've enabled that within Vizia by allowing users to go in, or admin users to go in, and update screens, change the information in real time from their tablet, from their phone, and that will affect everything. It'll affect the monitors maybe in a physical command center, or purely the screens that people are accessing via their laptops or their tablets as well.
One additional point I wanted to make on this particular point is command centers, a lot of people envision them as sort of displays in a glass room. And in that way, they sort of seem very limited. If you have to be in front of that particular display in order to know what's going on, it's really a limited solution. We wanted to make sure, and our clients were really looking for, to fill that gap in earlier versions of command centers in unlocking it and making it accessible. So it still has relevance within those boardrooms and within those environments where people are manning what is going on and how the social business is operating. But it has equal relevance to be in the team's hands wherever they are, whether that be in a bar or in on a work trip, a business trip around the world.
I think one of the other things is, of course, there's lots of benefits. There's also other benefits for having people in the same room. Mm-hmm. There's lots of communication benefits and those sorts of things. So, again, it's not to say that command centers shouldn't be physical spaces. It's
Agreed.
Just to say that information has to be available when you're on the move. I think that's sort of one of the key things. And we said there before about the technology side of things. It's not just about the technology. The business process needs to be in place so that, again, if it is in a crisis management situation and it all goes a little bit wrong, do we have everyone's phone number? Can we get hold of everyone? Who is it we need to get hold of? What's the escalation process? So these things, again, must be paired with the technology. Those processes must be paired with the technology to make an effective command center. And all of this brings us around to sort of talking about things being integrated and in sync. So The data, we talked about those 3 pillars at the start in that sort of rather, sort of, you know, in the model. Those 3 pillars being listening and analytics, the engagement and the publishing, and the visualization. Information is being passed backwards and forwards between these 3 elements constantly, and it needs to stay in sync. The technologies you're using should be integrated with one another. Now, that doesn't mean they all have to be from the same vendor. What it actually means is they just need to be able to talk to each other and pass information back and forwards. We launched a partnership program this year. We're really happy to be working alongside Spreadfast, and it allows our system to push data into Spreadfast, and for all of the great engagement and publishing capabilities that the guys have there, and they can use that on data that's coming out from Brandwatch. At the same time, when those actions happen, if you change the sentiment in those posts, that information comes back into Brandwatch and updates the information back in the listening and analytics platform. And the great thing is that Vizia, the visualization product, is also being fed by our analytics and listening platform, and so that also updates. So that means that each of those 3 platforms are synchronized with one another. And of course, the worst thing that it goes back to knocking all those other pieces of efficiency and productivity and smooth work processes is if those things aren't talking to one another, it becomes very, very difficult to run a proper business operation.
And one additional extension on that is thinking about integrated within the business itself and with other kinds of information that's flowing through the business.
Yeah.
So we thought about that in kind of formulating our new model as well, in how do you factor in different things that are happening. Let's say you're tracking activity around a particular marketing launch that you're doing, or a particular item that you're in the news about. Being able to watch real-time news in tandem with what's going on with the social data, all of that's equally important as well, because social data becomes even more relevant and more significant when it's consumed and viewed, you know, in tandem to those things.
Absolutely. So, and this is one of the things. Again, we've thought about how to do this, and we've allowed for Vizia to reach out and put in information from different places, and make that a part of the visual. So that means it actually can be animated in the same way that we can animate standard scenes within the product. Again, we're sort of aware of the fact that there are other systems where you might want to put information. And then the last one we've got here is really the clients were asking us that for each of those internal customers, they cannot present with one standard view. Their internal customers, the internal customers of the command center, wanted a view tailored to them. And that tailoring has to be easy, quick, easy to manage, has to be able to, as Eve was saying earlier, has to be able to be changed on the fly depending on the situation that you're using it for. And remembering that the social media command center can be playing multiple roles at any one time. It may be used for crisis management, but if there's no crises, it also can be used for the real-time marketing, or brand health, or customer service. So there's multiple uses that this unit can be used for on an ongoing basis. And that means that not only does the information need to be personalized to the individual business unit, but also to the situation to which it's being used.
Absolutely. Including elements of things like branding, or which kinds of data need to be displayed to a particular team versus another particular team. So personalization, I think, takes multiple different levels, and building that into how you create your model is really important, so that teams actually engage with the information that is given to them. If it isn't made relevant to their job, if it isn't made relevant to their experience, the likelihood is they will engage less with it.
Yeah, and you need that buy-in from the rest of the organization. So, with that said, let's jump into Vizia, and let's have a little look at what the product does. We're going to start, I'm just going to open up here. I'm actually just going to start back in the analytics platform itself, because this is really where things actually start. When we were talking about this earlier, we looked at that model. One of the key things is this is about data. There's information that comes in. We said that things, signals to noise ratios, all this sort of piece. So therefore, it's about having good data coming into that system. And so this really starts with our analytics platform. That's what the Vizia sits on top of. So why is that important? It's important because it enables us to create accurate, targeted searches within the system. So I'm not going to give you, don't worry, I'm not going to give you a full demo of the analytics platform, but there's two things I think are just very, very key that we can look at here. Firstly is we have something called queries. I might just dive over here to some queries. And these are these searches that define, okay, we want to find this piece of information, and that's what we want to bring in. And I was talking to someone earlier today about how you can use this information in the customer service environment, and how you can use social media command centers in that type of environment. And one of the key things was, well, I don't want 100,000 conversations about brand X. I want the 50 or 100 or 500 important conversations. And so you have to be able to write strings that identify those posts. So the first key element is getting the data right. And that's what the analytics platform allows you to do. So as a very quick example here, if we just look,
Yeah, I think it's back.
great. Sorry, looks like we just lost you for a second there. We are able to pull in all these information. So firstly, we want to be able to pull in the correct queries. So that's where we start with. The other piece that's really important, and one of the great things that Vizia allows you to do, is it allows you to use some of the filters that we have in here, and also some of what we call categorization. So within here, again, this is all just an example, but you can see that we can break out all sorts of information, whether we want to look at consumer issues, we want to look at bathroom conversations, or different, not that type of bathroom conversations about
good example,
bathroom furniture conversations, I should say. I apologize, I'm English. Or whether it's power tools and different products, customer service issues, and so on and so on and so on. We want to be able to break those bits of information out, and all those bits of information are based on or aligned with the output, and the output is our internal customer. So if that's the team that we're supporting, or one of the teams we're supporting, we structure the data that comes in to meet that team's requirements. So all that happens back here in the analytics platform. You'll notice we have something up here called a project, and again, I've got lots of different projects, which I won't go through all these projects, but what we're going to see is, I'm going to jump now quickly into Spreadfast, and what we'll see is that we have the ability to send the same projects and the same searches appear in our engagement and publishing partner platform. So let's just do that. I think I probably need to log in.
While Seth logging in, I just wanted to make an additional point about what kinds of data is available to track. Essentially, we're able to look at the whole of the social web, and that includes not just your typical social networks, but a variety of different types of sites, like news sites, mainstream media sites, things of that sort. And they're done in multiple languages. So if you think about the importance of unlocking social data and the value of it across the business and making that accessible across the business, that includes across the business in multiple regions. That includes, whether or not you have teams that are in Asia, whether or not you have teams that are in North America, and being able to make that experience relevant to them based on the data, the language, and whether or not the topics they're looking at are appearing more in forums or appearing more on Twitter. And then narrowing in from there, as you were saying, through the query terms that you use.
So let's just have a look here. So yeah, let's do this very, very quickly. But what I want to show you here is the same query that we've added here on this left-hand side is the same query that was appearing before. And if I just log in here to adding a stream into the Spreadfast social inbox, what we'll see is I can actually go in here, I can select Brandwatch going to load up my projects. And then from my projects, I can see the same project that we were seeing before. I can see the demo project we're looking at here. And I can see the same searches, those same queries have been built with that same logic that will appear into the stream here in Spreadfast. So I'm not going to go through all of these. We've had a few webinars around the integration here, so I'm not going to go through all this in detail. But I just wanted to show, before we get into Vizia, how these things are interconnected.
Yep.
So there's an interconnection with the analytics platform that connects to our engagement partner, and then equally, we're now going to go into Vizia and have a look there. So let's start with the back end of Vizia. What does that look like? For the person that has to deal with this on a daily basis, has to carry out the admin. Well, we've structured it in a fairly similar way. We've tried to make it very easy to use. We've put all of the functionality in the hands of the brand or the person managing the social media command center. So firstly, we have the concept of something here called projects. So this here, retailer example, is a project. Within each project, we have something called the display. You can notice here I have a number of different displays within this project. So I think I have maybe 6 different displays within this project. What this actually allows me to do is have one display per screen for my social media command center. We actually have one here in our office with 6 monitors up on the wall. And I can choose, log in for each one and choose which display I want to show. So a very easy way of organizing the information. One of the next things that we have is you can see that within this, for example, this top right one here, it's scrolling through different information. There's a smiley face coming through here, the chart lines coming through here. These are scenes, and what we have is scenes are pre-built visualizations. So all you have to do is select the scene you want, and then select the data you want to show in that scene. So let's just have a little look and see what that looks like. So if I click on the plus button here, and scroll down, we'll do webinar demo. I click the plus, and you can see the system's now saying, great, well, okay, we're going to create a new display, and what do I want to do? So I can decide which of the scenes I want to add. When I've selected one of the scenes, I can also select many other scenes I've created, which is a really strong way of doing it. So that means it remembers any scenes set up, including your filters and so on, and gives you a quick way to do it. So let's say it was in that crisis situation. You've already created a crisis scene that's ready. You can just select that. It'll pick up all the data, all the filters you want, and bring it straight into your display setup. But here we have is 6 different scenes. We're going to look at a number of these anyway, but I'll give you a very quick overview. The globe scene is streaming Twitter posts through with using our geolocation information. Tiles is quite an interesting one that gives you anything from 1 through 9 different tiles. Very, very flexible, can be pointed at pretty much any information within the Brandwatch system, and gives a really powerful view, and we'll look at that one in a second. Live sentiment allows us to show the sentiment for either a query or even a category within a query. So that means if we stick with this example, maybe we want to look at Lowe's. I can see the sentiment around Lowe's, or maybe I want to look at the sentiment around product tools, power tools, sorry, in Lowe's. I can do that too. Great thing about the live sentiment one is, again, you can have multiple charts showing on one visualization. Again, we'll show you this in a second. Category bubbles basically allows us to analyze how categories are performing in terms of sentiment over time. So, and whether they're getting smaller or bigger. And so this is a really interesting way of understanding, for example, let's stick with power tools here. If I understand whether drills or saws or routers and so on,
bathroom fixtures.
Yeah, exactly. Bathroom stuff. If I want to understand what's going on with those, I can use this and it will help me understand it, will visualize it for me in a very easy way, and we'll have a look at it in a second. The URL scene, again, very interesting, allows me to put in a URL and it will pull the information from that URL into Vizia. We're going to look at that in use in a second. Again, it's very, very useful for external data sources. And the final one is the video scene. The video scene allows me to select a YouTube URL, pull that in, and then it'll actually pull that in and play that link. Now that can be really helpful when we've got for example, our own channel up, and we want to have video as part of the social media command center experience. Now that can serve lots of different purposes. If a brand is coming in, we want to understand what's happening, if we want to see how things are getting played out, we can use the video link, and we found it really helpful, and clients have really liked that. So what we're talking about here is the ways you can display the information. One of the next key pieces, if we have a quick look here, is if I click on tiles, for example, and we create a new one here, and we'll give a little title here. The next thing you'll notice is it's asking me to bring up a project. So the same as we did just now in Spreadfast, and the same as we did just before that in Brandwatch, it's identifying, connecting to my Brandwatch subscription, and giving me access to the same project. So this is where it becomes completely interconnected to that data ecosystem. And if I select the project I want, it's now going to give me a few other options. It's now going to give me a selection of different tiles that I can choose from to show in this visualization. So it's helping me build out the visualization very easily. Do I want to show information about top sites or authors or history and topics and so on? So again, if we pick out one of these pieces, now if I select categories, it allows me to select from the categories that have already been created in the Brandwatch Analytics platform. The other great thing is the Brandwatch Analytics platform will automatically categorize data for us based on custom rules. That's a very, very powerful piece, because that means that as the user, you don't have to go in and categorize the post and then it will show here. The system does it in real time at scale. So we can select this piece here, and then the next piece is it's going to allow me to pick out a specific query. So now I can go in and I can say, okay, well, this is the search that I want to show this information from. Again, the search has already been built. We know it's giving us good data. We've had all the Boolean we can bring to that. So very quickly, very easily, date ranges. So of course, I might want to show any from today. I might want to show a full date range. Or I might just want to have a rolling date range and say, well, let's just roll with the last 7 days, for example. Very, very easy. And the next thing you'll note is that, okay, we've brought in some category information, we've brought in some query information, but what else can we do? Well, this is where, again, where Vizia is that mix, that great blend of not just visualization, but overlaying on top of real analytics. So what it also allows us to do is filter the information that's going to get shown in the visualization by any number of these different filters. So we can include categories, we can exclude categories, we can include tags, we can even filter things by retweets, page rank, whether it's on a particular site list and so on. I won't go through all of the filters, but just so you can see, there's a huge amount of filters you can still filter that data with here in the visualization. So it's a very, very powerful capability that sits on top of an already great data stack.
And I think that's a key piece about how it gets to relevance through the visualization. If you're able to filter down to the depths of, anyone on a team that's trying to do a particular project, or if they're part of a particular group, or they run an entire division in a particular region, those people can set those parameters to see only what they need to see, while other people in the organization can access different views of the data to get to what's relevant from them, even though the data source is all the same across the board.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about was that personalization point. And one of the key things here is you'll notice I've got lots of different projects. I've got a banking example, I've got a food brand example, I've got a retailer example, and so on. Each of these would be different lines of business, just different internal clients. So you could have 5, 10, 15, however many of you want of these different projects. Each of the ones you can have one that's set up with just one display, for example, and maybe that's the one that people want to access from the brand team on their tablet. Whereas you can have another project that we just looked at before with 6 displays showing lots of different information, and that's one of the ones that's powering the actual command center, physical command center. So the flexibility is all there for you to use. So let's have a look at how just before we do it, one last thing before we do that is up here we can see very easy to manage projects too. So you create these new projects, to delete them, to edit them, very, very simple. No reliance on us as a vendor. You can really log in, a little bit of training, you can use this as an admin user on your own side. So let's have a look at what these, some of these visualizations actually look like. So we were talking about the globe visualization here. On the right-hand side, we can see that there is streaming comments. Now again, these comments could be filtered down by, for example, just customer service conversations or just power tool conversations. Whatever we want to do to filter these comments on the right-hand side. But it gives us that real-time view of where the conversation is happening. And you'll note that on the spinning globe here, I can see there are conversations taking place across North America. And the blue dots are showing me where those conversations are taking place. That's using the geo data that's coming through from those posts. We look at about 4 different places on Twitter posts to get that information. We talked about the video URL. So I just click play here. And we'll see that what we've got here is, you'll see here it says loads how-to videos. This is all framed within Vizia, within the command center environment. But we're now streaming that video through this. So again, to visualize, if you will, we have the multiple screens up on the wall, and we've got this video streaming through. This really brings life to these command centers. I probably don't need to keep that playing, so we'll just switch that one away. So we talked as well about how the topic development and how this works with, let's just reload that. Come back to that one in a sec while that one just reloads. Or I'll just wait for it for a sec. Let's just come out of here. Come over here as well. So whilst that loads, I'm just going to open up a different view for you. Let's go back here to our screen down here. And we're going to look at, load up here, okay. And my browser decides to go a bit crazy. Okay, so let's have a look here. And let's open up this. So by clicking on the eye there, that enables me to sort of open up the display and see what it is that's going to be showing. I'm just going to load up the data here. We load quite a lot of information when we load these up, so hence the load time. And we'll be able to show this in a second. It will populate. Right, let's have a look here. Now, in fact, let's just load this and load this again. All these ones I just had loaded.
Yeah.
But whilst this loads up, I'm going to sort of just explain to you what's happening with this particular one. If we go in here, what we'll see is this actual. There we go. This one is showing me multiples of these scenes, so I can create different scenes, and it will scroll through each of these scenes. So here we've got a sentiment one, showing product lines, showing product topics. So I can have more than one data set showing for each display, and it will rotate. So you can see here, I can actually decide the timing of the rotation. So here we've got scenes set to rotate every minute. I can change that from anything from 10 seconds to 10 minutes. So I get a lot of control about how that information gets shown. Let's just jump back here. So I spoke before about the tile and how that one looks. And so what we're getting a view of here is kitchen appliance conversations versus power tool conversations. Now you notice it's flipping, and when it's flipping, it's actually using an algorithm to select which post it should show around conversations. So it's giving us examples of conversations that are making up this particular topic. That's really important. Next thing is that these categories are completely customizable, so they work to your business. We can see there's spikes in conversations and how they're dropping off. We can see here that what's happening with sentiment around these conversations as well. On the right-hand side, we can see that the categories are broken out, and so we can understand which, for example here, which are our most popular categories. There's that rotation I was talking about, the automated rotation that's going to come in. So I've got this one set up to rotate every 30 seconds, I think. And what we're going to get faced with now is it will come up and it's going to populate with topics. and it's going to show me the topics around the various product lines that I have within the unit. You should be able to see those on your screen just now. So a little web magic. The great thing is these will rotate, automatically rotate. So you should see here sort of coming up and giving me information around DeWalt and Bosch. And me jumping off 1 second. Sorry. I'm going to come back here.
Internet issue.
And let's just go back in here. All right. So let's just bring that one back up here. And we can have a look in here. And hopefully our office internet has not gone completely crazy. Which would be perfect timing.
We can also bring up screens if needed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So another one that we spoke about is the sentiment one. And so what we've got here is a brand versus 2 competitors. It's giving us that high-level view. Now, it doesn't have to be at the brand level. Again, like I said, it can be the category level. It can be 1 brand, 5 brands. It can be a single brand showing on this. The point is, you can really customize this to fit your client. You can even decide whether you want it to show, for example, neutral sentiment, or if you really want it to be only polarized around positive and negative. So the user has real control. Control goes back to that customization. The data bit goes back to the signal to noise piece. And also talks about to the personalization level. So this one is going to rotate again in a second, but I think it's going to go back to one that we've already seen. So I'm just going to quickly hop out here. And we're going to look at the topic bubbles. Let's just open this up. So the topic bubbles one, whilst this loads up, is going to load up based on the categories. So the category information that we had showing back here, it's actually going to open up and show us the topics and how they interact and how they move from, in terms of sentiment, from positive to negative, and how they grow over time. So this is, again, sort of a really nicely structured piece of information that's going to show up here in 1 sec. And you'll be able to, and it basically shows you, we can see here, soars over on the right-hand side, how that changed. So we can see some information, some sentiment scoring, some trending scores, the volume of mentions. Right-hand side here is the sentiment positive, left-hand here is sentiment negative, and we can see which have been our big movers over the time frame that we're looking at. So drills are always being popular product lines in this particular example. So where we're at sort of 15 minutes, I'm going to sort of jump out of it now and open the floor to questions. But hopefully what you've seen here, just to wrap up, is the way that all this data interconnects across engagement, across listening and analytics, across visualization. It allows for the customization and personalization. It really is a flexible tool that you can move quickly on. And this is, like I say, this is release time, so we've got much more in the roadmap planned around this.
All right, so we'll take some questions now. If you'd like to submit them, just get those in right now and we'll go through. Our first one has to do with queries. How far back can you pull in data from queries? 3 months, 6 months, a year?
June 2010.
Okay.
Is the answer to that?
It's very specific.
It is. Not May, just June. June 2010.
And our next question is, can you talk a little bit about how agencies are using this type of tool for their clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've seen some really interesting work. So RealTime Marketing is an obvious one. I've seen a team of people working with using a sort of command center view of things, but not actually just brands, but also around, it was actually an event. And they were also looking at topics of conversation. The point was, when they could see things that were trending, there was a team there that was capable of coming up with creative ideas, putting that together, working out how where they should push it, how they should push it, and pushing out very, very quickly. So real-time marketing example was brilliant. And of course, there are the crisis management examples where there is a crisis, something does blow up, maybe a brand doesn't house this internally on a sort of 24/7 model themselves, and so the agency becomes the go-to guy for the brand to support them on that side of things. The other thing I would say about this is that the social media command center that we've built here is accessible both to the brand and to agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of times where they need to work together. And so the system allows for that to happen actually at pretty much every level. So again, at the analytics level as well, so they can work together on solving problems.
Our next question is, how does this actually go out to the different screens and hardware from the system? So how is it being powered out to multiple screens?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just via the web. So all you need is a browser. I'd recommend Chrome. It's a great browser. And that's all you really need. Now, if you actually want some hardware tips, then do get in touch with us afterwards. There are, if you're going to manage 6 screens off of a system, then there are some better hardware cards out there for that sort of thing. But yeah, you just need a browser, that easy. And as I said, work on tablets and phones.
This next one is just a clarification. It's to get competitor sentiment, I have to create queries for those competitors.
Yes, that's correct.
So I have to pay for mentions for my brand and competitors, is that correct?
Yeah, and it depends. I mean, we have 2 different pricing models when it comes to the sort of data side of things. So either you can pay per query, or you can pay for a certain amount of data, so tens of thousands through to millions of mentions, depending on the size of your industry. So that's where you would manage that.
Is the look and feel of the display customizable?
That's a very good question. Yes, it is. So one of the things that I did not show you was in here I talked about being able to edit these projects. So one of the things that you can do here is I can even go down and I can select the color background. So if I want to have a light theme, I can do that. I can save that. But the other thing that I should say is that it's, I'll just load this back up. But all of these things can be customized. So even down to the colors that show in the charts, the logos that show on the page, we can actually design them to fit so they're sort of mixed in with the brand colors and so on. So all of this is completely controllable at that level.
And all the labeling is as well. So the text on the displays is all customizable to whatever you want to feature in that way.
Yeah, and here we go. I've just changed this now from being a sort of dark background to a light background. So absolutely customizable.
The next question also, is this possible to be white labeled?
Come talk to us about it. We're always looking to do sort of basically powered by Brandwatch. One of the key reasons is people really like to know what technology is sitting behind that. We have a great name, so I think we can really bring something to the party there. But yeah, we can come and talk to us about it.
How tuned is the sentiment right off the bat? Does the system require you to train it?
No training required. It's out of the box sentiment. We've been doing sentiment analysis now for about 6 years. We do it in something like 25 different languages. So we understand sentiment. We understand where it's great. We also understand its shortcomings. So one of the things we also allow is that you can create custom sentiment rules in the front end as well. And of course, those custom sentiment rules will be applied to the data that gets shown in the visualization.
Another question on sentiment, just to follow up on that. How accurate is it?
Automated sentiment is circa sort of 65 to 75% accurate. I mean, it's really the job of automated sentiment is there to act on huge amounts of data where you can't read all of them to work out whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. Of course, one of the things you can do, and what we've shown before, is that if you are going to stream in small sections of posts, so if we go from the tens of thousands down to where actually we've got 300 that are important and they're coming into the engagement system, if you change the sentiment manually in that engagement system, it's going to update everywhere else. So it's one change reflected everywhere else. We also allow for batch changes of mentions as well as the custom sentiment rules in the analytics platform too.
So basically you can tune it to a high level of granularity, but the automation in place gives you a good starting baseline.
And it should be, it should really be treated as indicative.
Okay. Next question, what is the learning curve for using this, and will it take more than one person to man it?
Well, I can use it. So that should be one measure to you. I mean, we've seen this back end, and it's not it's not a terribly steep learning curve. It's really quite easy. You go in. I showed you how you would create a screen there and a display and so on. So it's very learnable. And then once one person knows it, absolutely, one person can manage this. The display is for everyone in the organization. And one of the things we didn't really show there was sort of messaging, for example. You can carry on asking questions while I do that.
Well, actually, before you had a question, one thing we also didn't talk about was permissioning, which I think is really relevant to that point, in the sense that there's multiple layers of permissioning that you can do, whether you have administrator access or just, first of all, you can limit access so that certain people can't see it. And you can have different tiers of people who can do variations, either view only or just edit some things. You know, there's built-in capabilities there. And the value of that is, even if there's only one administrator, in the example that was questioned, you can still make viewing accessible to large amounts of teams or limited to other teams. So the permissioning, even though you want accessibility, you also want enterprise control. And so you have both of those kind of pairing off together.
There's actually another question, which was, does everyone who has access to my Brandwatch data, can they have access to Vizia?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, so our next questions, we're getting into pricing and packaging. So is this a separate plan from the main Brandwatch app?
Yes, it is. And again, if you want to talk about that, please do get in touch and we can put you in contact with one of the guys.
Yep, and similar questions from everyone else. An additional cost on top of the data.
It is indeed, but get in touch and we can talk to you about it. We'd love to talk to you about it. And then the last thing on this show is just, we talked about the communication and he sort of mentioned there the authorization side of things. So I thought it was good to show you sort of close out on the messaging so that we can, what we can do is we can write a message in here and we can write the content of the message and we can send that message. When we send that message, we can send it out to either specific screens or we can send it out to all screens. And what we'll see is I will get if I didn't just change my screen, and stuff like this. But we can basically message out to all of the different screens so that we can have let's close this up, load this up. So we can able to communicate that out across different teams. So it's one of the functions that we've literally just added to the system, but it enables for that communication to happen either as a ticker or as a pop-up. You can decide how long it lasts. You can relate it to things like if we have alerts and those things or updates to the rest of the team. As you saw there, I just want to wait for it to come up, but it's a really handy piece of functionality. And the last thing we can't show you today, unfortunately, is we've got a new piece coming out, I think just pretty soon, in the next few weeks, which will be connected to things like alerts as well.
Okay, and that looks like that's the end of our questions.
In which case, I'd love to say thank you to everyone for taking the time out to come and see it. If you want to know more or see more, then just get in contact with us and we'll connect you with the right people.
Absolutely, and I pasted a link in the chat. If you'd like a one-on-one demo at Vizia, just visit that link and fill out the form and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you everybody.